I want to thank you for coming today, and on behalf of the McCarthy Center and the Benedictine Institute, we welcome you. The Benedictine Institute is collaborating with the McCarthy Center on our speaker again for this semester. And there are a couple guests I want to make special acknowledgement of, and we do have 2 MPR employees here, so I'd like to extend a special welcome to you. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Matt Lindstrom, who is the director of the McCarthy Center, and he will introduce our speaker today.
All righty. How's everyone doing? Good. Fantastic. Chilly. Well, thanks, Chick, and thanks to Stacy Pank, the coordinator of the McCarthy Center, as well as Father Mark for putting this together. We've had a really exciting week. It's been extremely busy. Gary Eichten has visited probably about a half dozen classes. He did the main lecture at the Rotary Club downtown on Tuesday. He's facilitated a debate on Tuesday night. Wonderful conversation with Professor Hayes on Monday. Last night, if you read today's paper, or maybe some of you attended, he hosted a discussion with the governor, Governor Dayton, last night, and more today, and tomorrow, a little bit, just everything. He's really made fantastic connections with staff, with faculty, with students, and this, I think, symbolizes what the McCarthy Residency is all about. This is the 6th year we've been doing this, and it's been a fantastic honor to have you with us this week, Gary. Many of you know Gary, you've heard his voice on the radio, but just a couple quick remarks. He really was at the very beginning of Minnesota Public Radio, in fact, just right up over here, Wimmer Hall. He's been with NPR for 40-plus years. Right now he's the editor-at-large. He was a host of Midday for 20-plus years. He's won just about every major award there is to win. But, being the love child of Gandhi and Mother Teresa, we expect a lot. So, so enough of me. Help me welcome Mr. Gary Eichten.
Thanks for doing it. Well, thanks everybody. I've never been introduced as the love child of Mother Teresa and Gandhi. It would be nice if it were true. Say, you have in your midst, you maybe don't know this, but one great softball player. I haven't seen her for 30 years? Norma Ketter, where are you? Stand up, stand up. I had the pleasure of playing with Norma for a couple of years on the Minnesota Public Radio softball team. Unfortunately, she decided to come up here rather than stay in St. Paul. But she's excellent. She says she's not playing anymore, but I bet you could get her out there and she could show you a few things. I want to thank, all seriousness, I want to thank everybody who has been, I've had any association with this week. This has been a marvelously rewarding week for me. I went to school here, and kind of oblivious to everything, really, and had the chance to come back this week. Sunday was a particularly good day. I came up early to avoid the storm. I wanted to make sure I could get here. And what that meant was Sunday morning, before the Saturday night partiers were up, I had a chance to wander around the campus, check out the old haunts, look at some new haunts, and run into a few people that I remember from a long, long time ago. It was, a really eye-opening experience, but much more was to come because I started interacting with these students here. You people should be very afraid. They are really good. I got out just in the nick of time. It's been wonderful, to talk with the students. And everybody's been so kind. And I really, if you'd pass the word, I'm not going to get a chance to see everybody who I've run into this week. So please pass along my thanks to them for being just such gracious hosts. It's just really nice, and very. It leaves a person quite hopeful for our future when you deal with these students. I mean, they're rock solid. There's no question about it. And a big shout out to the guys and gals who clear the streets after snow falls. That is unbelievable how good they are. I went to bed, was it Sunday night? There were mountains of snow. I thought, oh, I may be in Collegeville to spring. Next morning I get up, everything, what snowstorm? There was no snow around. Same thing again last night. Those guys are really, really good. Okay, enough of that. I was asked, this event made me pretty nervous. It makes me pretty nervous because Matt here said, now Gary, you're going to be talking about Benedictine values and how they have shaped your life and career. Well, that presupposes, of course, that I know what Benedictine values are. I must have not been paying attention in class because I'm a little fuzzy on that. This is a Jesuit institution, is it? I knew that was going to get a rise. Okay. So, well, anyway, I frankly am not up on my Benedictine history as well as I should be. So I went to the St. John's, St. Ben's website for information, and sure enough, I found a lot of good information. A great discussion of what Benedictine values are all about and how they apply to university life and to life in general, broader life. Certainly one thing I noticed was a real emphasis on reaching out to the community, reaching beyond the bounds of the monastery to the broader world. And when you think about it, that's really what Minnesota Public Radio is all about. That's why Father Coleman Berry, who was the president of the university at the time, Hillary and all those folks who were around then, that's what they were interested in. It wasn't just starting another radio station, didn't need another radio station really, but here was an opportunity for a radio station, ultimately a network, to reach out, share world-class cultural programming, cultural values with our surrounding region, encourage civic engagement, promote public service, involve, service and so on and so forth. This was a real effort to go beyond the confines of Collegeville and St. Joe and reach beyond. And it's worked out pretty well. I was struck as I looked at the website about how often the word listen appears. Great quote in there. It says, the first act of understanding is often careful, focused listening. And, I nodded my little head when I read that because that has been really the key to everything I've been doing on the radio all these years. You get paid to talk when you're on the radio. Dead air is not a good thing. So you have to say something. But, of course, you can't really carry on a genuine conversation with anybody unless you listen to what they have to say. So often, I think we've all experienced it. You see or hear some guy or gal interviewing somebody, and by golly, they're really interested in making themselves look good and sounding good. And they're just utterly focused on that next question they're going to ask. And they don't pay any attention to what the interviewee is saying. That's not a conversation. And you don't learn anything that way. You have to listen to what people are saying. There's a lot of talk, justifiable concern, I think, about the lack of civility these days. Part of the reason I think we are in deep doo-doo in that area is because we don't listen to people. We don't listen to the other folks who maybe don't agree with us on everything. As soon as you hear something that, doesn't quite comport with your view of life, the heck with them. Shut them down. Instead of trying to figure out, what are they really saying? Why are they saying what they're saying? Is there any truth to what they have to say? I think listening is just, is really, really essential. Another thing I found that I thought was really interesting was the emphasis on community. a little preaching here. I personally believe there is far too much talk about, you know, or expression of the feeling, look, I got mine, to hell with you. You know, you're on your own, buddy. None of us, as far as I can see, got what we have just by ourselves. It's a result of being in a community. I know I sure had lots of help, no question about that. And if you set aside the moral responsibility of helping your neighbor, you know, all the Catholic social justice teaching and so on and so forth, just set that aside. As a practical matter, if you want to get anything done, if you want to make your life better, you've got to work with other people in community. Lots of examples. A silly one from my line of work, pledge drives. Everybody likes the pledge drive, right? Yeah! Coming to an end today. But you know, when you think about it, a pledge drive is a perfect example of how this community-focused life operates. No one person, no small group of people, no one organization could have built Minnesota Public Radio. Instead, it took St. John's University to launch the station, and then St. John's University to free the station so it could go out and raise money from foundations, corporations, and the rest. That still wasn't enough to build a network. We needed contributions from individual people. So over 100,000 people are throwing their nickels, dimes, $100 bills in the kitty. And pretty soon, everybody working together, you end up with a world-class radio network. To my mind, certainly the best in America, and who knows. It's really good, but it's only possible because people pitch in, work together. No one person could have done that. No small group of people could do that. You can't build your own highway system. You can't have your own military armed forces. You can't have your own social safety net. You can't do it by yourself. You have to do it in community. Now, there's a word on the website, which is probably not an official Benedictine value, but I think something else that deserves a shout out as we think about how our lives come together, and that is luck. Pure, unadulterated luck. I know I have been extraordinarily lucky in so many ways. I wanted to go to the University of Minnesota and get a journalism degree, and I had a good chance to do it, but I was lucky enough to chicken out. You know, I went down and said, oh, this is way too big. I can't deal with this. I'm a little small town guy from Mankato, too many people. And St. John's, boy, they showered a scholarship on me, $50. So I came up here, and, you know, what did I end up with? Pure luck. They started the radio station. Father Coleman Barry decided, hey, let's have a radio station at St. John's, Minnesota Public Radio. I signed on early on, a couple of months into the thing, ended up with a radio career. A career. Pure luck. I had no plan to do that, no grand vision. I didn't even know I wanted to do it. I just rather did that than wash pots and pans in the refectory. But you talk about luck, you know, and if it hadn't been for Coleman Barry and the entire community here, backing his vision, who knows where I would have ended up? Who knows where any of us would end up if it weren't for pure luck sometimes? I was lucky enough to stumble into a great liberal arts education here at St. John's University. I could have spent, if I'd gone to the U, hours and hours in journalism classrooms, learning how to run a TV station or learning how to be on the radio. All of that. And I don't mean to diss that. That's great. And you learn a lot in a situation like that. But I contend that spending 4 years, as I did, spending 4 years learning philosophy, history, English, government, languages, best preparation possible for what I ended up doing, being on the radio doing news programs. I could teach you, anybody in this room, and not me, but pretty much anybody in the business, I could teach you what you need to know in terms of how to do the mechanics of, say, radio news. a couple of weeks, maybe a month. Then the question is, what's in your head? Do you know anything? And that's where this liberal arts education that I got here became so very important. I'll give you an example, philosophy. Now, I don't recall ever, there are very few things as obtuse and weird as philosophy classes. I mean, some of it is just impenetrable. But I took a lot of philosophy classes, and although I don't recall ever once talking about philosophy as such on the radio in 45 years, I can assure you that those classes really helped me learn how to think. They really helped me appreciate that the world operates from different vantage points. There's all kinds of ways to look at things, and they really taught me to appreciate the fact that things are not always as they seem to be, which is not a bad skill to learn if you're in the news business. Again, you know, you never hear about, I've never talked about philosophy on the air, but I could never disassociate my career from that background. Liberal arts, it says on the website, the liberal arts are a rich preparation for the professions, public life, and service to others in many forms of work. And it certainly is true in my life, and I hope that students today aren't so pressured to get a job, make a buck, pay off their debts, that they miss out on what I think is perhaps the most valuable opportunity that these two institutions have to offer, namely a great liberal arts education grounded in those Benedictine values that I'm still trying to learn about. Now, I've got some other stuff I could talk about, but why don't we just take some questions and answers? Is that okay? While we're standing here waiting for somebody to have the courage, a quick poll. We got the Academy Awards coming up. You get two choices. How many people want Lincoln to be named Best Picture? Raise your hands. Oh, come on now. How many people want Argo to be named Best Picture? So we have a smattering for both pictures. Do we have any other nominees? Zero Dark 30. Anybody want that picture other than this gentleman here? This is a tough crowd, boy. Glad I'm not in the movie business. Oh, by the way, two old movies. If you have any interest in like journalism questions and stuff, two old movies. Remember the old Network movie from 1976? This is the one where the TV news guy Howard Beale goes crazy. You know, I think they're taking him off the air and he can't take it anymore. So he says to his audience, I want you to open your windows and yell, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Well, of course, it was great satire. You know, it was a great movie, great satire in 1976. Unfortunately, it's kind of reality TV now. You know, people, you know, who do that kind of stuff get rewarded handsomely. That's not such a good thing. And then, of course, there's the Good Night, Good Luck movie, the Edward R. Murrow movie from 2005. Some of the classes, I had a chance to do a little film review thing yesterday with 12 students, and boy, are they smart. Ooh-wee. And another class is doing, if you haven't seen that picture or you haven't seen it for a while, worth going back and looking at it. It's a great examination of how Edward R. Murrow dealt with the McCarthy threat, not our McCarthy. This is tail gunner Joe McCarthy, red baiting and all that stuff. And it's a great example of what journalism could be if we demanded that it would be in this country. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
45 years on the air?
Yes.
That's the worst guess in life.
Oh, my. Here we go. Let's see. The best guess, I'm going to bob and weave on this one. And it sounds kind of hokey, but it's true that almost every guest that I had an opportunity to talk with was a good guest. And I mean that in the sense that I learned something from them. Hopefully the audience did. I think the audience did. So in that sense, you know, and some were better, as we say in the business, some are better talkers than others. In other words, they're better communicators, more articulate stuff. But most of them were, you know, these are good guests. There were a few people who, you know, you just shake your head. How in the world did a kid from Mankato ever end up talking to this person? And I would put Senator McCarthy, Eugene McCarthy, on the list. First time it ever occurred to me that, man, I am in over my head. And, you know, former Vice President Walter Mondale, I've had an opportunity to do several programs with him over the years, and you know, kind of get to know the man. Walter Mondale? Well, you know, and all the governors and stuff like that. And there's so many people from other fields. It's not just politicians, but there's some of those folks you just pinch yourself and why in the world are they talking to me? I got a story about that, if I may. As my father, bless his soul, I tell this story and people think, oh boy, he must have been a mean man. Well, he was a great guy, and I loved the man. Anyway, he never knew what I did for a living. I mean, he knew I was on the radio, but he never listened to Minnesota Public Radio. He had no clue. Okay, well, that was fine, but I kept thinking, gee, it would be nice to make that connection, that personable father-son connection. We were both vets, and so when I'd go back to Mankato, we'd end up at the Vets Club, have a few cocktails. Some of his cronies would come over, and they did listen, and they would say, well, Gary, I heard you talking to blah, blah, you know, that was a great show and all that stuff. And Vic would just look puzzled, you know, what is that all about? It was very, very disheartening, so I thought, oh, I've got to make this connection. One day, he was a big baseball fan. Big baseball fan. One day back, you know, 25 years ago, I had a chance to interview Kelvin Griffith. Now, I don't know if you folks remember who Kelvin was. He was the original president of the Minnesota Twins, brought the Twins to Minnesota, kind of a legendary guy. And so anyways, well, anyway, so I interview Griffith, go back to Mankato, sit down at the bar, cronies come over, Gary, it was great to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. And finally I thought, aha, I've got him. I said, Dad, you'll never guess who I interviewed today. He said, who? I said, Kelvin Griffith. He looked at me and he said, what the hell do you want to talk to you for? So there's a lot of pinching that goes on when I think about people who I've interviewed. I'm not going to get into the worst person that I talked with, although I will say that it wasn't that she was a bad person. It wasn't that it was, well, we just didn't get along well. That's, I guess, is the best way to put it. I'm not going to use a name here. We just didn't get along very well. I think she was a movie star, and I think she was used to being fawned over a little more than I'm not much of a fawner. And so she didn't like me. I didn't particularly like her. We spent an hour together kind of banging heads. I put it out of my mind until the summer, right after I announced that I was retiring. And one of the nice things about that was, you know, people were coming up, oh, Gary, you're Mother Teresa and Gandhi's love child, you know, all that. And very nice. I mean, I was so appreciative of all the nice things that were said. And a woman came up to me at the state fair, and, you know, she was very complimentary. It was very nice. And she said, you know, I've loved your interviews all these years. I mean, they're all so good, but, you know, there was one that stood out, and that was when you talked to, you two were so simpatico. Boy, you just loved each other, didn't you? Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, Gary. See, this is why I'm a little shaky on those Benedictine values. I didn't put as much time in the rule book as I should have. Well, you know, it was an education in and of itself, and so you do what you have to do. I was learning a lot at the station, learning a lot in the not so much in the classroom, but doing the best I could to keep my head above water. What did I do? Well, pretty much everything. I mean, you know, there weren't that many people there, so we did everything that there was to do, from trying to keep the Gophers from eating our cable. Some of you remember this. We had a cable that, especially in the earliest days, that ran from Wimmer Hall out here to where the transmitters or the tower site is. I don't even know if it's still there anymore. And it was all fine, except that it was available to the Gophers, Stearns County Gophers, and about every month, bingo, you're off the air until the cable is repaired. This happened on a regular, and of course we also had problems in the studio. I understand many of you work here at this, and I don't mean this as an insult. In fact, it's high praise, because we had a gal who was our cleaning lady, and she was uber conscientious. I mean, she was there every day, and she was cleaning. We had the cleanest radio station in America. There was only one problem. She was attracted, I guess, to the little spinning things, the vinyl records. They would be playing, and she'd come by, and yeah, sometimes there was just a little dust on that record. So she would pick up the tone arm and start dusting the record in the middle of the symphony. Well, it wasn't so good, you know. And it took a while for us to figure out what was happening. Why at Tuesday morning, 9:30, every Tuesday morning, the symphony would be interrupted. And of course, invariably, she'd put it down in the wrong place. Yes, sir. Vaguely, yes. Uh-huh.
20 years before NPR, he had a ham radio podcast.
Yes. Oh, I bet it did. I don't know. I don't know if any inside information about that, but I remember a lot of talk about that, and certainly Bill Kling, who was the present CEO, and this guy, by the way, is another Johnny, and he is a real genius. And when the history of broadcasting in America is written, he deserves his own chapter. I mean, he built Minnesota Public Radio. He helped build National Public Radio. I mean, the list of credentials is on up. But anyway, and he's got his start here. Coleman Barry picked him out of the crowd and sent him off to one of the Bostons, university or college, I don't know. Came back here with a master's in business, and Kling did a pretty good job. But I remember him talking about the ham radio stuff. He was more technically oriented than I was. I could barely, turn the mic on. I'm pretty helpless when it comes to that stuff. Yes.
What are you reading these days? Are we ever going to see the Gary Eichten book club?
No, there will be no book club. One is enough. I think, the dirty little secret is that I am a horribly slow reader. And this actually made it kind of hard getting through college. It just takes me a long time to read. But I did finish here a 700-page tome, the Walter Cronkite biography, Douglas Brinkley, the historian. That's pretty interesting if you're into that sort of thing. That's pretty interesting. And currently rereading a book by Joe Galloway. I don't know if any of you ever heard any of the shows I got to do with Joe. He was a great war correspondent for UPI at the time in Vietnam, and just a great illustrious career. So I'm rereading that. We Were Soldiers Once and Young. It is a searing, important book about war and what we ask our young people to do sometimes I don't know for what reason. I won't get into that. Yes.
What stands out in your mind about Eugene McCarthy between
His brilliance, his sense of humor. I mean, first of all, I think he graduated, if biography remembers, 19 years old. He graduated from St. John's at 19. I think he started here when he was 15, graduated when he was 19. He was a top-notch baseball and hockey player. Big guy, real big guy. I've always thought in my mind that Eugene McCarthy was kind of a normal-sized guy. Actually, he was quite tall, but he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant mind. He was a poet probably more than a politician, although he was a good politician, more so than he gets credit for. But he was a poet, and so a lot of times I didn't know what he was saying. You know, it went right over my head. You know, I'm not smart enough to keep up with the guy. He had a great sense of humor, a wicked sense of humor, but a great sense of humor. And again, for reasons that I don't understand, I mean, you know, he actually, I guess, liked me. And he would call, no, I'm serious. You know, he'd come back from Virginia and he would call up and ask if he could please be on midday. Well, no. We don't have time. But he was a heck of a guy, I think. Yes?
Between you and Will Kling and Garrison Keillor, what did your three different personalities bring to the early station? And how were they different?
Well, I was just a hanger-on. And I'm serious. You know, I'm a kid watching this unfold. These two guys, I told you, Kling is a genius. And, well, so is Keillor. Very different people. Wildly different people. One is an entrepreneurial genius. One is a creative genius. Both worked their butts off. And both needed each other desperately. I mean, Kling needed a radio personality, somebody with a big talent that people would want to listen to and ultimately pay money for. Keillor needed an outlet for his talent. When I first met him, you know, when he first came here, you know, he was not being published by anybody. There were a few people in the Twin Cities who knew who he was, but that was about it. You know, and there was all this talent bubbling along with no place to express it. Well, it was like a marriage made in heaven, except it was sometimes a pretty rocky marriage. Should I tell the emissary story? All right. This is, I suppose, 1971. Yeah. Anyway, I was here, and then I went off to, I got drafted, basically, went in the service, and, but I kept in touch with Bill and Garrison, and so I was back here on leave, and I came up to Collegeville. I thought, well, heck, I'll, you know, visit the old haunts, see the guys and stuff. Well, much to my surprise, you couldn't see the two of them at the same time. There was a war underway. Kling had ensconced himself upstairs in Wimmer Hall. Garrison had ensconced himself out at his farm in Freeport, and ne'er the twain shall meet. Now, each one needed the other, and they knew that, but they refused to talk to each other. I thought, well, this is kind of weird. So why don't I try to find out what's going on? So I talked to Bill for a little while, and he wouldn't really tell me what the source of his irritation was. Drove out to talk to Garrison. He wouldn't really. Talking to Keillor, by the way, can be an interesting experience. You can spend a lot of time just standing and looking, but he's really a good guy. Anyway, so I was trying to figure out what was going on. So you'd get just a little nubbin, you know, just a hint. And like, say, in Freeport, so you drive back to Collegeville, you know. Well, now, Bill, understand that there might be a way you could do this. Oh, no. Maybe you could do it like this. So back to Freeport, back and forth. It was a precursor to Henry Kissinger's shuttle diplomacy. But it worked eventually. You know, you could glue them back together. But they were and are wonderful people. you know, I just count my blessings. I had a chance to get to know them and work with them, but they are very different people. There's no two ways about it. One more question? Yes?
What kinds of projects are on the horizon for the editor-at-large of McCarthy?
Well, it's a good question. I hope that I'll be able to start doing like a monthly program about something. You know, I don't know. I so enjoyed doing the show with Cokie Roberts at the end of October that I'd love to do some more things like that. Well, we'll see. And then there is the Eichten Fellow. Do you folks know about the Eichten Fellowship thing? You know, St. John's and NPR were so kind to create this fellowship. You know, it kind of, I think it was to urge me to get on with the retirement, I think is what happened. But what they did was come up with a program where every summer, last summer was the first summer, this is the second, there'll be a third, and you know, hopefully there'll be more than that. One St. John's student, one St. Benedict student gets selected to go down to Minnesota Public Radio for the summer, learn all about the radio business, and most, you know, rather than just a normal internship, though, the best part about this, for my taste, is that they get paid all summer. It's like having a full-time, hardcore job. And, you know, I say that because I could never have afforded something like that. You know, I couldn't take off a summer, and that just was beyond the realm. But here's an opportunity for a couple of students, bright students, to really learn something about journalism, the radio business, and get paid to do it. And when they get done, they're either radio professionals, which they are at the end of this deal, believe it or not, or at least, at worst, they'll know how information comes their way, how broadcasting works, how the stuff they're listening to, seeing on TV, reading on the internet, how all of this comes their way and how to weigh it and measure it. It's a heck of a program, and so I get to fiddle around with that this summer again. We'll see what else comes up. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gary, for coming. This is educational and entertaining. I'm still kind of stuck back on Mother Teresa and Gandhi, but
It's a high standard to live up to.
it is indeed. And on my to-do list, I just added contacting Abbot John to get his thoughts on adding luck as one of the Benedictine values. So, but thank you for coming, and Father Mark would like to say a few words.
I just want to thank all of you for coming to the events of the Benedictine Institute. This has certainly been one of our big highlights. I want to thank Father Hillary for bringing us this far. And let's give a hand to Chick for organizing all these wonderful events.